Okay, thanks everyone for coming to our webinar on a lovely Thursday evening, which is in fact Earth Day. So it's an ideal day to be discussing things like solar PV. So my name's Paul Rogers, and I'm part of the Innovation and Technical Evaluation team at NEA National Energy Action. Also taking part in the webinar is John Geffin, who is the chair of, as you see, John's waving to you all there. He's the chair of 361 NGCIC, which is the community energy organisation which works across the north of Devon. Helping us this evening as well is Michael Potter, who's from the communications team at NEA. So he's going to hopefully be admitting everyone to the webinar, and he's going to be sorting out some videos for us. And also we've got Michael Hamer, who is the Innovation and Technical Evaluation Manager at NEA. And so there's the opportunity to put questions as we go along in the chat function that you have with Zoom, and Michael's going to try to answer some of those questions as we go along. So if you look on the bottom bar on Zoom, that there's a chat button which is kind of in the middle of the bar, and you've got the mute button on the left and the stop video button next to that. So I'm going to do a presentation about solar PV and battery storage. And after that, John's going to talk a bit about his personal experience with solar PV, battery storage, and electric vehicles. And at the end, we can have time for more of a discussion. So you can ask questions about the sort of things we've been talking about, and we can have a general discussion for as long as people like, really. So okay, so there's a wide range of people who have signed up for the event, we've got people here who know limited amounts about solar PV, all the way to people who are experts, really. So and we've also got people from across Devon and Cornwall to London, Yorkshire, and also the North East. So we hope there'll be something of interest to everyone in the event this evening. So how are we doing now? So we've got over 20 people here now. So we'll I think we'll make a little bit of a start so that we don't finish too late, and hopefully as Mike will be able to let people come in as they join. So right, we'll start with a presentation from me. So here we go. That's sharing screen, and where are we? Slideshow. Okay, so yeah. So in the webinar, I'm going to describe a solar PV advice project that NEA has been working on, and some of the advice materials that we've produced. I'll provide a brief introduction to solar PV and discuss ways it's possible to maximise the benefits. I'll also describe a battery storage project we ran a couple of years ago with North Devon Homes. After that, John Geffin from 361 Energy will discuss his experience with solar PV and battery storage. And there'll be the opportunity for questions and answers at the end, as I said. And also you can put the questions into the chat, so that and hopefully Michael will be able to answer some of the questions as we go along. So National Energy Action is the national fuel poverty charity, and we're 40 years old this year, and our head office is in Newcastle, although we've got staff that are based around the country. Our work includes training of frontline workers, campaigning for an end to fuel poverty, research and insights, and advice for households. Our technical and evaluation, our innovation technical evaluation team typically evaluates the performance of energy saving and renewable technologies for homes. We're currently working on an advice and research project around solar PV, which is funded by the Energy Industry Voluntary Redress Scheme. Project's called Increasing Self-Consumption of Solar PV, and the partners are NEA, along with N2 in Sunderland, WDH in Wakefield, and the London boroughs of Camden and Waltham Forest. As part of the present of the project, we've produced a series of advice materials for residents and for frontline workers. We're offering one-to-one advice for residents, and we're also planning to install a number of small measures which will help residents better understand their solar PV systems and make more use of the free electricity generated. We're also aiming to assess how beneficial households find these measures. Part of the project, we've produced this 12-page advice leaflet on solar PV, which was sent to over 7,000 socially renting households with solar panels. As well as the advice leaflet, we've also produced a more detailed advice about solar PV on our website. It also has the solar advice leaflet and a video that we'll be showing a bit later. So the solar PV system consists of a number of components. You have the solar panels on the roof, and these generate DC or direct current electricity. There's an inverter which converts the DC electricity from the solar panels into AC or alternating current electricity, which can be used in your home. Components like the inverter might be fitted in the loft, but there's also switches called isolators, which electricians use to safely work on the solar PV system. Each solar PV system will have a generation meter. This might be fitted in the loft or near the consumer unit. The generation meter records the units of electricity the solar panels have generated. Now, social landlords often have a smart generation meter, allowing them to read the meter remotely. If the solar panels generate more electricity at any time than you're using in the home, the excess is exported to the electricity grid. This slide shows an inverter in the loft. The black switch on the left is the DC isolator. The red switch on the right is the AC isolator, and above that is the smart generation meter, which provides regular readings from solar for the solar generation for the system owner. This slide shows some components in the hallway. Above the red AC isolator switch is the smart generation meter for the solar. You can also see the electricity meter above the consumer unit. In this case, the resident needs to be careful not to read the generation meter by mistake when providing a meter reading for their electricity supplier. On the right of this slide is a standard generation meter that an owner-occupier will typically have for their solar PV system. There's a red LED that flashes periodically when the solar PV system is generating. The faster the LED flashes, the more the solar PV system is generating, and at night the LED is constantly lit. In the middle of the picture, you've got the AC isolator again, and on the left, you've got a mini consumer unit for the solar PV. Now, this has a 30 milliamp RCD, which is a residual current device, which protects against injuries from electric shocks. This might trip, for example, if the insulation on the DC cables connecting the solar panels wears through. This slide shows the generation from a solar PV system and how it varied on 2 days last summer. The curve on the 11th of July in blue shows typical performance on a sunny day with a clear sky. Generation gradually increases over the morning to a peak and then drops off later in the afternoon as the sun gets lower in the sky. On a cloudy day, such as the 13th of July, there was less sunlight on the solar panels and so less generation. The sharp peaks are likely to be when the sunshine broke through the heavy cloud. So solar panels generate less electricity in the winter in the UK because the sun is lower in the sky, the days are shorter, and the weather tends to be less sunny. The slide shows monthly generation in kilowatt hours per day from a solar PV system in London over a period of several years. You can see that peak generation is from April to August, with a significant decrease in generation between November and February. The generation for any particular month varies quite a bit between years. However, the annual generation varies less as weather patterns tend to even out over the year. So not all the solar electricity generated is used in the home. The percentage self-consumption is a measure of the proportion of the electricity generated by the solar panels that's used in the home. This graph shows the typical percentage self-consumption for a household with an annual electricity consumption from the grid of about 3,000 to 3,500 kilowatt hours. We can see the percentage self-consumption is higher if you're in all day, shown in blue, compared to if you're out all day, which is shown in grey. Also, the percentage self-consumption decreases as the annual generation from the solar PV system increases. A household that's in all day with an annual generation of 2,000 kilowatt hours might have a self-consumption of about 40%. For comparison, if the solar PV system had an annual generation of 3,500 kilowatt hours, which might be typical of a 3.5 or 4 kilowatt system, the percentage self-consumption would be less than 30%. So Mike, I'll stop sharing now. Could you show us the video, please?
A solar PV system has solar panels which convert sunlight into electricity. There is also an inverter which converts the electricity so it can be used in your home, and a generation meter which records the amount of electricity produced. A solar PV system generates more electricity on a sunny day than on a cloudy day. It also generates more in summer than in winter. You can use the electricity the solar panels produce for free, and any excess will be automatically sent on to the electricity grid. If you consume more electricity than the solar PV system is producing, you will purchase the additional electricity from your electricity supplier. Imagine you are doing your washing. Earlier in the morning, the solar panels might generate 500 watts. If the washing machine uses 2000 watts, then 3/4 of the electricity to run it will have to be bought from your supplier. Later in the morning, when the sun is higher in the sky, the solar panels might generate 2000 watts. If the washing machine is still consuming 2000 watts, the washing machine will be fully powered by the solar panels, and you would be washing for free. If the solar generation rises to 2200 watts, then the washing machine would still be fully powered by the solar panels. 200 watts is being exported to the grid. In practice, the amount of power generated by solar panels may vary throughout the day, with clouds affecting the amount of sunlight hitting the panels. Also, the power consumed by appliances like a washing machine will vary as they operate. You can use a solar PV monitor to keep an eye on how much power your solar panels are generating and see how much power your appliances are consuming. If you have a smart meter with a display, this can help too. Different household appliances have different levels of electricity consumption. If you know the power ratings of your appliances and the amount of electricity your solar panels are generating, you can know what appliances can be powered for free. Use high-power appliances like washing machines when the solar panels are generating most. This will be in the middle of the day, especially when it is sunny. Use larger appliances like washing machines and cookers one at a time during daylight, so that the solar panels can contribute more and less electricity will be required from the grid, meaning they are more likely to power them for free.
Mike. Right, let's go back to this. Okay, as you saw in the video, there are a number of things which can assist in maximising self-consumption of solar PV. You can monitor the output from the solar panels, so you know when there's greater electricity generation. You can also monitor your household electricity consumption and compare that against solar PV generation, so you know when additional free electricity is available to power appliances. It helps to be aware of the electricity consumption of different appliances and try to use the high power appliances at times when there's more PV generation. You can also consider installing complementary technologies which make good use of the solar generation. A range of different types of solar PV monitor are available. The one on the left is a GeoSolo 2 PV. This is a display that just shows the solar PV generation. It does this by having a sensor that measures the number of flashes from the LED of the generation meter. The EcoEye Smart PV on the right is a monitor that will measure solar PV generation and household consumption. It measures this with current clamps, which are fitted by the meter and with the feed from the solar PV towards the consumer unit. Here are some monitors which require the internet to operate. At the top is a Weeby monitor, which has current clamps which fit it around cables in the consumer unit. This particular model can measure both electricity consumption and solar generation, and this data can be displayed on a phone app or web portal. On the bottom left is what's known as a Wi-Fi dongle that can be plugged into a particular brand of inverter. This can connect to the resident's Wi-Fi, so the amount of electricity produced by the solar panels can be monitored online, again via a phone app or web portal. A good method for monitoring the household electricity import is the in-home display that comes with a smart meter. At times when there's excess solar PV generation and electricity is being exported to the grid, the in-home display should register that the home is importing no electricity. This could indicate it's a suitable time to use additional appliances. It's possible to increase the self-consumption by use of other complementary technologies which also consume electricity. One example is an air source heat pump. Manufacturers recommend they operate consistently through the day, and some of the electricity from the heat pump can be provided by a solar PV system. The graph on the slide shows data from installations in a project we're involved with in Wakefield. The solar PV system generated most electricity between March and September, the bit that's shown in yellow. However, the air source heat pump consumed most electricity from November to March, which is shown in blue. So the solar PV is making a relatively small contribution towards powering the heat pump in winter, but there are times, such as in March and April, when it's cold outside and there's typically higher solar generation, just as we've been seeing in the last month or two. Another complementary technology for solar PV is an electric vehicle, which may need several hours of charging several times a week. This can be done overnight and scheduled to occur during an off-peak electricity tariff. It can also be done during the day with solar PV, reducing the charging costs. The Zappi EV charger from MyEnergy, which is shown on the right, can automatically use any excess solar PV generation to charge an electric vehicle so that it can be charged for free. If you're in a rush, you can still charge at particular times on full power. A solar immersion controller can also make use of the solar generated electricity that would otherwise be exported to the electricity grid. In this case, it can power the immersion heater in a domestic hot water cylinder. This particular model is a Marlec Solar iBoost solar immersion controller, and it's also got an iBoost buddy controller monitor. MyEnergy manufacture a solar immersion controller called the Eddy. This can be combined with the MyEnergy hub to provide monitoring via the MyEnergy app. The system here requires the internet and a smartphone or tablet to provide the monitoring. The home screen for the MyEnergy app is shown on the left. This shows the amount of electricity generated by the solar panels, the amount of electricity going to or coming from the grid, and how much power is going to the Eddy immersion controller. The app can also plot graphs. The one on the right shows the solar generation on Good Friday this year, on April the 2nd. It was a sunny day, and the 4 kilowatt PV system generated 22.3 kilowatt hours electricity over the day. Here we see the electricity consumed by the Eddy solar immersion controller on the same day. There was a peak in water heating at 10:30 a.m. after a shower had cooled the water in the hot water cylinder. There was another large peak at 2:30 p.m. after hot water had been used over lunchtime. In total, 1.6 kilowatt hours of electricity was diverted to the immersion heater that day. The amount that's used by the Eddy depends on both the solar generation and how much hot water is consumed from the tank. In this graph, the plot in red shows electricity import from the grid. The part of the graph in green shows household electricity consumption powered by the solar PV. The area in yellow shows the amount of PV export. Here we see details of the appliance use which caused the peaks. In the evening, in the red, cooking after 7 p.m. caused the peak in electricity import. During the day, there were peaks in household consumption due to the Eddy solar immersion controller, running a washing machine, cooking, and running a lawn mower. Despite all this appliance use, the majority of the solar generation was exported during the day. This example, however, was for one of the days with the highest PV generation in the year. It'd be very different on a cloudy day in winter, or with a smaller solar PV system. Household electricity consumption tends to be greatest in the morning and the evening, while solar PV generation, as we've just seen, is greatest in the middle of the day. And much of that generation can be exported to the grid. A solar PV system can charge a domestic battery in the middle of the day using some of the excess solar generation. This can be supplied to the home by the battery later in the day when there's greater household electricity consumption. These are some examples of domestic batteries. The two on the left are smaller models, which could only supply 1.6 kilowatt hours of electricity. On the right of the picture is the much larger Tesla Powerwall 2. Self-consumption of solar PV increases after adding battery storage, particularly with larger batteries. I'll now discuss a project that NEA did with our North Devon homes that use Tesla Powerwall batteries. As an introduction to this, we'll show you a video we made about the project. So I'll stop sharing and Mike can load up the video for that then.
North Devon is a rural community, and there are an awfully high number of properties that are in off-gas areas where perhaps some of the more traditional sources of helping our customers control their energy use aren't available. This project was innovative in a number of ways. I think the things that attracted us to it the most were the way that it was looking to pass across cost savings to customers. If you take off peak tariff energy, store it and make it available for customers to use at the time that they want to use it, and are most naturally inclined to be using that energy, that there's inevitably a saving. It works for customers, it works for the environment, and it works for the organisation. So we thought that was particularly innovative. In addition to that, I think that the way that the NEA were going to approach the monitoring and the recording of the data, both before install, during initial use and into the long term, was a really powerful thing for us. We think all the time, if we can collect that information about how these technologies actually work in practice, that'll be a communication tool that helps not just to inform customers that we might want to engage with in the future, but helps to inform others in the community about the sort of savings that really come through.
This project in particular is really exciting because it's the first one that we're aware of using the Tesla Powerwall 2 for just reducing people's costs using off-peak charging rather than connected to solar panels as well. The installation of the battery units is actually, sort of fairly straightforward. So the Tesla Powerwall 2 can actually be mounted internally or externally, so they're quite flexible on where you can actually put the Tesla unit. And then there's a few other bits of kit as well. You have to have the gateway, which is the sort of main brain of the unit, which you are monitoring all the flows of electricity coming from the grid and going back out to the grid. And you then have to connect all to the internet, so we can then monitor all the technology and see how it's going. So it's usually a day installation and is normally very nice and neat because there's not a huge amount of additional equipment.
The advantages of having the battery have been tremendous. We haven't used any appliances differently at all during the day, but it's enabled us to increase our heating at the coldest periods of times using the booster on the night storage heaters, and obviously it's drastically cut down our bills. Since we've had the Tesla battery, I guess we've felt more freedom to be able to use electricity how and when we want, whereas before we felt more constrained due to the energy pricing. A good example is, ironically, just in the last few days, our water heater has gone, the night heater, and we can now put on the daytime immersion heater to heat up the water without any worries at all. And it certainly doesn't seem to have impounded much on the cost.
Thanks, Mike. Just start sharing again. So the project installed, oops, just put my video on. There we go, and I'm not muted, that's good. Yeah, the project installed batteries in 8 North Devon homes properties which did not have solar PV. The houses were off the gas grid and had storage heaters on an Economy 7 tariff. The Tesla Powerwall 2 batteries installed had a usable capacity of 13.5 kilowatt hours. Batteries had a maximum power output of 3.6 kilowatts or 5 kilowatts, depending on the grid connection that was allowed by Western Power Distribution. This meant the batteries were able to fully power most appliances apart from electric showers. Most properties had some residents who were at home all day, and so the homes were high electricity consumers. This graph shows the electricity consumption in amps from a house before and after the Tesla battery was installed. Before the installation, there was high consumption throughout the day as the weather was cold, and the residents left several plug-in oil-filled radiators running. After the installation, the battery charged overnight, increasing the power consumption during the off-peak tariff, and was able to supply all the electricity to the home during a significant part of the peak rate period. This slide shows images from the Tesla app, which you saw in the video, for the same household. The battery charge and discharge is shown in green, with the charging shown below the axis. On the 8th of June 2018, the battery charged overnight. There was some additional overnight electricity consumption from the electric immersion heater. The Tesla battery was able to supply all the electricity required by the house for the rest of the day, apart from some import from the grid when there was an electric shower. On the 5th of January 2019, the household was again using oil-filled radiators, and there was high consumption over the whole day. The battery was able to fully power the home in the peak rate period until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This slide uses smart meter data from before and after an installation. It averages the consumption every half hour for days in June 2017 in blue prior to the installation, and June 2018 in orange after the installation. So in June 2018, there was greater consumption during the off-peak tariff overnight due to charging of the battery. However, during the day, the peak rate electricity consumption decreased to only a negligible amount. We calculated the savings due to charging the battery during the off-peak tariff and discharging the battery during the peak rate tariff. And so a simulated electricity tariff was used for all the households of 18 pence per kilowatt hour during the peak rate period and 7 pence per kilowatt hour for the off-peak period. Based on this, 6 of the households made average savings of over £1 a day. These were all households where there was at least one member at home during the day. There was one household which was saving on average about 60 pence per day. In this case, both residents were out at work during the day. If there were solar PV systems on the houses, the savings would have been even higher. The households would have been, in that case, able to increase their self-consumption of the solar generation due to the battery. In an ideal situation, they'd be able to charge the battery for free with the solar PV in summer and charge a percentage of the battery from the grid using the off-peak tariff in winter. So there's a lot more about this project with North Devon Homes in a report we wrote, which is available on the NEA website, and there's several other reports about battery storage there as well. And one last plug from me is that NEA will soon be launching a new set of e-learning modules that will make up a training course called Decarbonising Homes, Technologies, Impacts and Solutions. You can find out more about the course on our website, where it's being promoted on the home page. The course is made up of 8 separate modules and an introduction. We're providing a detailed handout for each module, and we hope that the course will be ready to launch in the middle of May. So that's pretty much all from me now. And so I'll hand over to John, who's going to say more about his personal experience with solar PV and batteries. So over to you, John.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think my experience probably backs up on quite a lot of what you've been saying. But I thought it was nice to get it from the horse's mouth, as it were. Just very quickly, I've lived in 3 houses with solar PV. One was 3.8 kilowatts south-facing roof. That was in Portishead near Bristol. In Croydon, where I live now in North Devon, I live in a house with a 3.6 kilowatt east-west system. So half is on the east roof, half is on the west roof, which I can talk a bit more about if you like. And I'm also, I own a house in Croydon with a 2.6 kilowatt south-facing roof. All 3 of them have SMA Sunny Boy inverters, the big red jobs, which I think one of the ones that Paul showed was a Sunny Boy. They're one of the more common ones you get. So the systems were all installed in 2011. And we've got data going back over that time, so 9 years worth of data. And just in the last 6 months, I installed a Powerwall, a Tesla Powerwall at home in this house, and 13.6 kilowatt Tesla Powerwall. So it's only been in since the end of September. So I've got about six months of sort of winter usage. So I haven't got a full year yet, unfortunately. So I can't really show you, what it's like over the whole year. But certainly I can show you the trend in how it's helping me use my PV much more than I was before. And also 4 years ago, I purchased a 75 kilowatt hour Tesla electric car. And obviously with the battery, there's a lot of interaction between using the home battery, the Tesla Powerwall, and the Tesla car. I can tell you about how the systems sort of work together, really. say something a little bit about reliability. Over 9 years, I've had no problems with the inverters. People often say the inverters have got a shorter lifetime than the panels. Well, maybe 9 years isn't quite long enough, but so far, so good, and no problems at all. Maybe I'll get one before too long, but hopefully not. So that's been no problem. I have had a problem with connectors on the roof in this house I live in now, which is the east-west one, and particularly on the west side, which is facing the sea. We get a lot of obviously salt air, and the house was let out to another couple for 2 or 3 years, around about 2015, 2014, 15, 16. And when I moved in 2016, I realised that the output of the solar was a bit variable, and some days it wasn't starting up. And I'd look at the graph from the Bluetooth connection to the Sunny Boy inverter, and it wasn't either. Some days it didn't start up at all, and other days it maybe wait until 12 o'clock, and then it would suddenly fire up into power and then start working. And I realised there was something wrong, and it was showing an earth fault. Eventually, I got a local company in Barnstaple to come out and look at it for me, and they diagnosed that a lot of the connectors on the system were corroded and were letting in water from either rain or whatever. I say it was mainly on the west side of the roof. So we got them changed. It cost about £300 to do that, but I didn't need scaffolding, luckily, because I got a flat roof next door and they could get onto the roof without scaffolding. So, but I reckon I was losing probably about 500 kilowatt hours, about 15–20% of the power from the solar PV due to that problem, which is probably worth well over £100 a year. So well worth doing the repair. And I think it just highlights the fact that you do need to keep monitoring your system, which is what Paul's been saying. The tenants before us took no interest at all in it. I mean, if they'd been here, a few more years, we probably wouldn't have known. And so that fault would have carried on for several years. So we're monitoring and having the right monitors, as Paul has suggested, is ideal, and trying to make sure whoever's the tenant or the owner of the house is keeping an eye on it, because these faults do occur, and the quicker they are sort of picked up the better. I have noticed a similar problem on the other house in Croyd. It may not be a problem inland, it may be particularly a salt problem, but it's certainly a problem I've come across, and it'd be good just to keep an eye on that sort of thing. In terms of making the most of your PV, interesting enough, when I was living in Portishead, I did a lot of monitoring of the system, and I reckoned I was using about 25% of the PV generation, which is exactly what Paul was saying in that graph he showed of self-powering. Obviously, I think Paul said all this about trying to use items, the right time of day. Some machines like washing machines and dishwashers, they have timers on them. You can perhaps time them for 2 or 3 hours, ahead. So, but obviously a lot of the stuff is happening mornings, evenings, and overnight. Your fridges and your freezers are operating overnight. And there really isn't a lot you can do. I did install a solar immersion switch, as Paul hinted at, and that has been brilliant. From about March till September, frankly, we didn't pay for hot water heating. Probably with a bigger family and having lots of showers, then you might have to back it up with your gas or your other supply. But certainly, yeah, that was great. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And obviously, since having an electric car, I've tried to max the amount of PV used during charging. I've got a normal tariff electricity. I haven't gone for off-peak. I've still been waiting for one of the time of day tariffs to be easily available. But obviously, when I'm trying to charge during the day, having an off-peak power supply doesn't make a lot of difference really. Although obviously in the winter I do charge overnight on the grid. But I try very hard to maximise the power going into the car. Now to do that, the output of the system in summer is around about say 2.5 up to about 3 kilowatts. So I can adjust the charging going into the electric car. I can set the rate from 32 amps right down to 5. So 32 amps right down to 5 amps. So I can get about 1.1 to 2.3 whatever kilowatts. And so I do that. I adjust the charge rate as I match the PV. So if I know it's going to be a really nice sunny day, perhaps this time of year and a bit later, when I'm expecting 2 kilowatts to come out of the PV, then I set the car to charge it around about 2 kilowatts. So I'm maximizing the PV. This is all very much a manual operation. So it's, you have to be a little bit nerdy, like people like me are, so that you kind of like look at the sun, look at the time of day, look at what's going on, and you're trying to adjust all the various parameters of your system to maximize the PV, minimize the cost, obviously, but also minimize the carbon. My main driving force has been climate change and trying to reduce my carbon footprint all the time. So I'm quite happy to spend a bit of time doing this during the day. So yeah, Paul mentioned the Zappi charger, which can take PV and put it into your electric car. I've got the Tesla wall unit, which doesn't have that facility. So which is why I have to be a little bit careful. If I don't charge at the right rate, then I'll be using a lot more grid than solar. So I adjust the rate to try and maximize the amount of solar. I think overall, since I've had the car, around about 10% of all the charging I've done has been from the PV. Around about half the charging is done at home, and the other half is done on the road. So, I'm probably, that means about 20% of my home charging is PV, and about probably the other 80% is coming from the grid. But obviously, the car's a big user of power. Now then, installing the battery, the Tesla Powerwall, I must admit, I think mirroring some of the things that were said on the video, what Paul said, it does revolutionise the way you can use your PV. It's absolutely fabulous, really. So obviously, you can just let the PV run into the battery. You don't have to worry about when you turn the dishwasher on. As long as the battery's got some charge in it, you're going to be getting PV power operating your dishwashers or washing machines or the car or whatever it is. So you can use appliances pretty well whenever you want. You haven't got to worry about time of day. Obviously, it works overnight, so your fridge and your freezer they'll be working happily overnight on PV from the day. In April, there have been several days. Obviously, this has changed. Obviously, over the winter, the amount of PV is quite low, so the battery hasn't really done a great deal. Made a great deal of difference. But obviously, as we come into the sunnier days, then I've noticed there's been a significant improvement in the amount of PV I'm using, and the fact that I'm not exporting. I haven't exported. I've exported, I think, about less than 1% of the solar since September. Now, as we get into the high summer and there's a lot more PV, then I think that will probably increase. I will be exporting a bit more. But in April, several days when I didn't use any grid at all. I think overall, the PV panels have supplied about 63% of the demand, including the car. In March, it was around 50%, and then it went down to about 25% over the sort of middle of winter. As the summer progresses, I would imagine I should get the self-supply up to around about 80%. That's what I'm hoping. So, because obviously the amount, as Paul has mentioned, the amount of solar that comes through in sort of May, June, July is far, far more than March, September to March. One problem I have had, Paul mentioned, and I've mentioned the solar immersion switch, which has been great up to when I got the battery. Once you get the battery, of course, you then got to decide where does your solar PV go. Well, obviously, you put it into the battery. That's the priority. The battery takes priority over the immersion. And when there's not a lot of solar PV, then all of it goes into the battery, and then goes into the car or into the home, and none of it goes into the solar immersion. So you're then using the gas or whatever your source of power is for your hot water. So, well, you can change the way which gets priority, because the systems both rely on measuring when there's an export. As soon as there's an export flow, the battery senses the export flow, and then the solar PV is directed into the battery. And the same with the solar immersion heater. That does the same thing. It detects export flow and then switches the PV into the immersion heater. So at the moment, the battery is set at about 20 watts, I think, export. and the immersion heater, the immersion switch is set at 50 watts. So the way I get around that is to basically fill the battery up. So once the battery's full, nothing can go into the battery, and then the solar immersion switch takes over, and the excess power goes into the immersion heater. So it's a question of juggling. You're having to juggle all these different sort of outputs and inputs to try and maximize the amount of solar. So the trick is to ensure that you can use all your solar available when the battery is full. The electric car is useful in this regard, because obviously if the solar's you're generating and your battery is full, it'll go back into the grid unless you've got somewhere to put the power. So having an electric car doesn't, as long as you don't fill the electric car battery up too often, you've got a bit of room there to sort of absorb the rest of the solar. So I say there's a lot of juggling going on with the solar switch, the electric car, the home, and there are lots of settings on the battery as well. You can set the minimum amount of power you want in the minimum amount of charge. So you can set, say, 20, 30, 40% is your minimum charge, and it won't drop below that. So there's various parameters you can play with on the system. Hopefully one day, Paul's mentioned some of these smart systems. Hopefully one day there will be smart systems around that will help you do all this monitoring and juggling and balancing all the various inputs and outputs and making sure you're making the most, both in terms of saving carbon and saving money from your PV. And obviously there'll be things like vehicle to grid, where the vehicle battery is actually helping to balance the grid times a day when they want to use less or use more power. And all those different power flows around your home into your batteries. It's a complicated equation, if you like. And I spend a fair bit of time during the day doing those sums in my head and trying to make sure I'm using it. But I'm sure smart systems will become available, which make all this a lot easier. Just one last thing. One thing about the Powerwall too is that it can actually back up your home energy if you get a power cut. As long as you've got some power in the battery, which is why you have a minimum, then it'll take over and it'll power your home during a backup. Now, I didn't think that would be much use, and I think it's obviously an American system. I think the American grid system must be pretty rubbishy, because they obviously need a lot of backup power in case the grid goes down. I didn't think we need that much here, but actually, since I've had it, there's a little record. You can find out what your backup history's been, and it's been on quite a few times. Once for about 18 minutes, other times for perhaps a minute here and a minute there. But it's interesting to see that you do get these grid fluctuations, and so the battery is actually helping to maintain power into the home in those situations. Not an important facility, but quite a useful one. I think that about covers it now, Paul. I think I've said all I need to say, really. Thanks very much.
That's great, John. Thanks very much for mentioning that. I'm glad you mentioned about the battery backup, because the project we did with North Devon Homes was had an earlier version of the gateway which didn't have the facility to be able to run during a power cut, and I gathered that one of the households had 2 or 3 power cuts during the period that we had the battery with them, so could have benefited from that feature.